A peculiar quiet accompanies you into adult life. This isn't a peaceful quiet. It's a quiet born from an absence, a sense of a missing piece you can't quite identify. You feel it while surrounded by others, yet you're emotionally worlds away. You feel it when you achieve something and register nothing, when you stumble and register it all too deeply. This quiet is the echo of a childhood that wasn't completely experienced. Many believe childhood is a phase you simply outgrow. The reality is, it's a foundation you carry with you always. It doesn't vanish at the age of 18. It just conceals itself in your behaviors, your anxieties, your responses. It resides silently in how you form bonds, how you sidestep confrontation, how you pursue flawlessness, and how you feel unworthy of a break. The fact is, an unlived childhood doesn't just disappear, it becomes the source of your pain. As a child, you weren't only learning to speak or count or tie your laces. You were learning what kind of person you had to become to be secure. You learned which forms of love were acceptable. You learned how much of your true self was permitted before you faced rejection. And based on your environment at the time, you were taught either that your emotions were valid or that they were excessive, that your needs were important or that they were an inconvenience. When you were taught the latter, a part of you started to fade. Perhaps you became the dependable one, the child who looked after everyone, earning praise for your maturity. Perhaps you became the silent one, discovering that being unseen was less painful than being misinterpreted. Maybe you were the comedian, keeping everyone amused because it beat witnessing their conflicts. Whatever role you adopted, it wasn't by chance. It was a strategy for survival. It was your method of declaring, if my true self isn't lovable, I will transform into what is required. But the price for that transformation was your genuine nature. You buried aspects of yourself so profoundly, you eventually lost track of them. As you aged, these concealed parts didn't vanish. They simply waited, like sealed mail intended for the person you once were. This explains why numerous adults experience persistent anxiety, isolation, or detachment, even if their external lives appear successful. The human psyche, you see, doesn't gauge fulfillment by achievement or safety. It gauges it by integrity, by the alignment of your current self with the child who once had fearless dreams. Losing contact with that child means losing more than innocence. You lose your sense of wonder. You lose the ability for true play, for genuine rest, for self-forgiveness. You begin to live completely for show, striving harder, accomplishing more, relentlessly demonstrating your worth. Yet the emptiness persists, because the thing you're trying to gain today is the affection you missed back then. This is a phenomenon psychologists have examined for decades. Studies in attachment theory and developmental psychology reveal that your childhood emotional environment physically molds your nervous system. Growing up where love was erratic or feelings were dismissed wires your brain to expect rejection and to deaden pain. This is known as adaptation. It aids your survival through childhood, but it silently sabotages your adulthood. The very patterns that protected you as a child, perfectionism, avoidance, rumination, transform into cages when you are an adult. You learn to mute your feelings, and as a result, you struggle to experience joy. You learn to be a high achiever, and suddenly, resting feels like a transgression. You learn to be self-sacrificing, and suddenly all relationships feel draining. The very defenses that once kept you safe now block you from connection, inspiration, and tranquility. Yet, this is the part most people miss. A lost childhood isn't just about unpleasant memories or missed opportunities. It signifies emotional disruptions, points where your growth was halted, times you couldn't express a feeling, and so it stayed suspended within you, unresolved. And emotions that remain unresolved don't simply vanish, they repeat. They surface again in your triggers, your phobias, and your disproportionate reactions to minor events. This is why a minor rejection can feel devastating. It isn't just the current slight. It's the accumulated weight of every past moment of feeling unwanted, magnified, and brought to the present. It's why a small critique can feel intolerable. It's not merely the words, it's the resonance of every instance you were made to feel inadequate. The body retains what the conscious mind attempts to leave behind. Any adult battling anxiety or a sense of void isn't damaged. They are incomplete. They are attempting to conclude a narrative that was cut short. This is why, regardless of your accomplishments, you may never feel truly full. The objective was never to accumulate more. It was to recall who you were before society conditioned you to shrink. Some individuals attempt to occupy that empty space with work. Others use partners, and still others use diversion. Perpetual scrolling, unceasing noise, a mind that won't quiet. But no solution is permanent because emptiness cannot be outworked. You must confront it. You must inquire of the child inside you what it required but was never given. That single question has the power to shift everything. Perhaps the need wasn't for material things or ease. Perhaps it was the need to be witnessed, to be heard, to be permitted to weep without being shamed, to be loved unconditionally, to learn that errors were permissible and didn't nullify one's worthiness of love. And until you provide those things to yourself in the present, the child within will continue to seek them from external sources. This pattern is visible everywhere. In those who dread being left, yet preemptively push people away. In those who long for closeness but behave remotely. In those who pursue accomplishments only to feel hollow upon reaching them. This is because the unlived childhood doesn't disappear with age. It just puts on mature clothing. It learns to appear capable while silently yearning for an unknown something. And perhaps this is familiar to you. That instant, you recognize your emotional response seems disproportionate for an adult. When a minor setback shatters you. When another's quietness feels agonizing. When tranquility feels alien. This isn't a lack of maturity. It is a memory that has not healed. That is your internal child, still awaiting resolution. You need not subscribe to any esoteric idea for this to be true. The field of neuroscience corroborates it. When a child endures emotional disregard or high stress, their brain's alarm system becomes hypersensitive. It remains on high alert, anticipating threats, looking for signs of loss. And when that child becomes an adult, the body keeps reacting as if the danger is still present, even in a secure environment. This is why the healing process often feels disorienting. You aren't actually battling your current circumstances. You are calming your history. But this is the paradox. The faster you flee from your unlived childhood, the more audibly it pursues you. The more you push it down, the more it molds you from beneath the surface of your awareness. The only exit is to go through it, to cease dodging the quiet and instead hear what it has been attempting to communicate all this time. Reconnection is still possible. The child you were is not gone. They are simply interred beneath strata of duty, expectation, and self-criticism. Each time you laugh without restraint, relax without guilt, or offer yourself forgiveness, they draw nearer to the surface. Each time you select kindness over shame, you restore that child's voice. You can begin in small ways. You could compose a letter to the person you used to be. You can gaze at old photographs and refrain from judging the face staring back. You can permit yourself to experience sorrow without labeling it as weakness. Every gesture of self-compassion is a call for that child to return. You understand, healing is not about altering your history. It is about taking back your permission to feel. It is the realization that the affection you waited for, the approval, the concern, the security, you can provide it to yourself now. This isn't self-indulgence. This is the most authentic form of maturity. It's the point at which your present self becomes the guardian you always required. Once you start this process, something extraordinary occurs. You cease living in survival mode and begin living as a participant. You cease pursuing validation and start pursuing tranquility. You no longer require others to comprehend your pain because you have at last comprehended it yourself. The unlived childhood does not dictate your future forever, but its whispers will persist until you pay attention. And when you do, you will see that your suffering was never a penalty. It was a signal indicating you have strayed too far from your core. It is time to come back. When you at last cease fleeing from your history, an unanticipated thing happens. Initially, it isn't comfort. It is sorrow. You start to perceive all the experiences you were denied, not by choice, but because circumstances demanded you mature too quickly. You begin to mourn the birthdays that are blank, the times you wished to speak but were unable, the minor instances when delight was supplanted by obligation. This mourning is profound because it's the first time you are not deserting your younger self. You are remaining with them. Mending your lost childhood is not about altering your memories. It is about providing them with context. It is about recognizing that what you perceived as a flaw was, in fact, an adaptation. That the tears you held back were displays of bravery. That the person you are today, scars and all, did precisely what was necessary to endure. The majority of people evade this type of introspection, finding it too agonizing. But agony is not the adversary in this. The agony is evidence that you are at last experiencing what should have been felt long ago. And when it is finally acknowledged, it starts to ease. This is because feelings don't vanish through rejection. They dissipate when they are understood. A concept exists in psychology known as reparenting. It involves learning to provide yourself with the nurture you were denied. It is not about assigning blame to your parents or altering history. It is about acknowledging your current power to supply what was absent then. When you engage in reparenting, your self-talk begins to shift. Rather than asking, "What is wrong with me?" you begin to affirm, "It is natural that I feel this. It is understandable." Rather than insisting on perfection, you extend patience. Rather than deadening your feelings, you learn to hear them. As you would listen to a frightened child who simply needs comfort, this is the way true healing starts. Not with critique, but with allowance. Allowance to rest. Allowance to feel. Allowance to be, without having to justify it. And gradually, that allowance transforms into peace. It is odd how, as adults, we lose sight of the fact that we can generate our own safety. You can construct it in your internal dialogue, in the way you establish boundaries, in the way you cease justifying your pain to those unwilling to understand. Security doesn't always equate to comfort. At times, it means releasing what is known but toxic. At times, it means being solitary until you find the part of yourself that can stand unafraid. Many individuals mistake healing for fixing, but you are not an assignment to be finished. You are a garden requiring cultivation. Some periods are for expansion, others are for dormancy. Some days you flourish, some days you let go. This is not a setback, that is a cycle, and the more you respect that cycle, the more you begin to feel vital again. Have you ever observed the effortless inquisitiveness children possess? They do not conceal their enthusiasm. They do not feel sorry for being astonished. They perceive wonder in the most basic things, a shape in the sky, a reflection in water, a noise. This is what is forfeited when your childhood is lost. You cease to be amazed. All things become programmatic, rational, calculated. But when you re-establish contact with your inner child, even minimally, life regains its texture. Hues appear more vivid. Melodies feel more profound. You begin to observe the way light filters through the canopy, how a beloved song still causes a tightness in your chest. This isn't just nostalgia, it is a recollection. It is your essence stating, "I recall the feeling of being complete." A subtle strength lies in permitting yourself to play once more, not for an audience, not for a performance, but just to be in a state of joy. Play does not signify a lack of maturity. It signifies receptiveness. And as you become more receptive, your pain defines you less, because pain thrives on suppression, not on consciousness. When you illuminate what is concealed, it forfeits its power. In reality, the majority of your adult difficulties are not recent. They are old injuries wearing new masks. The dread of failure is the dread of letting someone down. The dread of rejection is the dread of being unlovable. The compulsion to succeed is frequently the urge to demonstrate your worthiness of notice. And when you follow these patterns back to their origins, they cease to manipulate you. You begin to respond rather than react. You begin to choose rather than repeat. One of healing's most significant moments is the realization that your parents were also children at one time. They bore their own unlived childhoods, their own unresolved quiet, their own anxieties. They transmitted what they had been taught, even when it was insufficient. This insight does not absolve the pain, but it provides a context for it. It liberates you from the perpetual question of, why wasn't I loved as I required? Because in some cases, the individuals meant to teach you about love had never been taught it themselves. Forgiveness, therefore, is not about absolving anyone. It is about releasing yourself from the burden of their narrative. It is about declaring, this pattern does not have to continue with me. You can acknowledge what occurred without letting it dictate your identity. And that decision, that silent rejection of the inherited emotional void, is what breaks the cycle of generational trauma. Even so, a deeply human quality involves yearning for what has been lost. You might see old photographs and feel as if you are looking at someone unknown. You might ask what happened to that vibrant, inquisitive child, the one who felt that all things were possible, but they remain. Waiting just behind your skepticism, your fatigue, your defensive walls, they are waiting for you to see them once more. And when you finally do, you may weep. Not from sorrow, but from recognition, because you will understand that they were never truly gone. You simply ceased to look. Mending your unlived childhood is not a final point. It is a lifelong dialogue. It exists in each minor act of compassion you offer yourself. It is in selecting truthfulness over evasion. It is in discovering how to rest without guilt and how to love without dread. And in time, the pain that once governed you transforms into a guide. It starts to direct you rather than torment you. When you begin to inhabit that healed space, all things shift in subtle yet profound ways. You no longer require external approval because you have learned to approve of yourself. You cease pursuing connections that reflect your injuries. You begin to draw in people who resonate with your peace. Your career becomes less about demonstrating your value and more about communicating your truth. Even being alone starts to feel gentler, as you are no longer lonely. You are in the company of your complete self. A lovely truth often escapes notice. Healing does not restore you to who you were prior to the pain. It forges you into someone new. Someone capable of holding both happiness and grief, without being defined by one or the other. Someone who recognizes that sensitivity is not a weakness, but a kind of wisdom. Someone who grasps that peace is not the lack of conflict, but the capacity to be present with it without fleeing. You cannot reclaim the childhood that is gone, but you can construct the adulthood that child was worthy of. An adulthood filled with kindness, originality, and authenticity. You can laugh boisterously without apology. You can rest without needing authorization. You can decline without fear. You can love without forfeiting your identity. This is how you pay tribute to the child you were, by providing them with the life they were always intended to live. So if you feel adrift or hollow, do not hurry to repair it. Be present with it, because that hollowness is not a void, it is an invitation. It is the opening through which your authentic self is requesting to come back. And if you listen carefully, you will hear it. That soft murmur from deep within saying, I am still here. I have been waiting for you. From that point forward, healing feels less like a trek and more like a homecoming. You start to recall how to feel secure within your own body. You start to find your voice again, the one you quieted long ago to maintain harmony. You start to live more deliberately, more kindly, more patiently. You start to realize the world is no longer oriented against you. It is waiting for you to participate in it completely. And perhaps one day you will look at your reflection and see not just your current face, but all the iterations of you standing in solidarity. The child who hoped, the adolescent who concealed, the adult who persevered, all of them, at last, at ease. And in that instant, you will grasp something beautiful. The life you were seeking was not external. It was always inside you, waiting for your return. You will start to comprehend that your suffering was never the foe, it was the threshold. It guided you back to your own truth. It removed everything that was not love until love was all that was left. And that is the subtle prize of healing. Not flawlessness, not perpetual joy, but understanding. The understanding that each painful moment was leading you to this very place, to this quiet, to this compassion, to this reunion with yourself. Because ultimately, that is what healing truly is. Not an escape from your history, but an embrace of it, with open arms. It is saying to your younger self, I see you. You did what you could. You are allowed to rest now. I will handle it. And for the first time, the quiet feels different. It is no longer the quiet of an absence. It is the quiet of peace. The sort that settles when the internal conflict ceases. The sort that hums gently in the space between breaths, confirming that you have endured, that you are complete, that your narrative, despite all its pain, was never a tragedy. It was a homecoming.